All right, let's kick things off with a question that's, well, it's a little strange. Have you ever just stopped and wondered, is there another version of me out there? I mean, someone who looks exactly like you, thinks like you, but maybe they made one tiny different choice this morning? Maybe they had tea instead of coffee. Or, maybe in their timeline they became a rock star.
Well, what if I told you that this isn't just some wild, late-night thought experiment? The idea that there are, in fact, infinite copies of you living out every single possible version of your life? That's a startling but also kind of logical conclusion that comes right out of modern physics. It's a concept so wild, it even has a name: the infinite clone paradox. Okay, let's really dive into this. This paradox, it's not science fiction. It's actually built on just a few very simple assumptions about the universe we all live in. And the crazy part is, if you accept these assumptions, the existence of your infinite doubles becomes, well, almost unavoidable.
So here's the basic recipe, and this comes from the work of Oliver Linton. First, you just assume that space goes on forever, infinitely. Second, you assume the basic rules of physics, gravity, electromagnetism, are the same everywhere you go. And third, you assume that if you take any patch of space, there's a finite number of ways you can arrange all the stuff inside it. Seems pretty reasonable, right?
This quote really nails the idea. A great way to think about it is with the number pi. You know how pi's digits just go on forever, seemingly at random? Well, because of that, any number sequence you can possibly imagine, your birthday, your social security number, anything, it has to show up in there somewhere. Not just once, but an infinite number of times. The paradox suggests our universe works exactly the same way. So that first assumption is a big one. Is the universe actually infinite? It's a massive question, for sure. But one of our most successful cosmological theories today actually suggests that the answer is yes. Let's see how that works. The cosmologist Max Tegmark calls this the level 2 multiverse. It comes from a theory called eternal inflation, which is basically a souped-up version of the Big Bang. So imagine the Big Bang didn't just happen one time. Instead, picture this huge cosmic ocean that's always expanding, always inflating. And inside this ocean, our universe is just one tiny bubble that popped into existence. The theory says this process just keeps going, forever, spawning an infinite number of other bubble universes, all of them existing way, way beyond anything we could ever hope to see.
And this is really the core logic right here. It's simple math, really. If you have an infinite canvas to paint on, but you only have a finite number of paint colors and brush strokes, you are mathematically guaranteed to repeat your paintings. It's inevitable. Eventually, you'd have to paint an exact copy of Earth, with an exact copy of you living on it.
So just when you're starting to get used to the idea of having a cosmic twin out there, the whole argument hits a massive roadblock. Yeah, it turns out one of those simple, perfectly reasonable assumptions we made a minute ago might be completely wrong. The whole paradox, the whole idea of infinite clones, it really hinges on that third step, that there's a finite number of ways matter can be arranged in a box of space. But what if there isn't? What if the number of possible arrangements is actually infinite? And this slide really highlights the critical difference. On the one hand, space itself seems to be quantized. It's made of these tiny, indivisible little units. That means any chunk of space has a huge, but ultimately finite number of slots. But what about the things in those slots? Take a particle like a photon. As far as we know, a photon isn't limited like that. It can have literally any amount of energy, which creates an infinite number of possible states it could be in. And that, right there, is the fatal flaw in the argument. Because particles can have this infinite variety, the number of ways to arrange them in a finite space is also infinite. So the recipe for infinite clones just falls apart. You are, in all likelihood, unique. At least, in this cosmic sense. Okay, so we've pretty much debunked the idea of clones scattered across some infinite cosmos. But physics, it has another even weirder trick up its sleeve. What if the other yous are much, much closer than we think? What if they're being created right now? And this brings us to one of the most truly mind-bending ideas in all of science, the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. This is where the whole concept of parallel universes gets really personal. You see, the standard way of thinking about quantum mechanics says that a particle exists in this fuzzy cloud of possibilities until we measure it, and then it kind of chooses one reality. But the many worlds idea says something completely different.
It says that when we observe a particle, we don't force it to choose.
And here's the punchline. According to this theory, every single possible outcome of a quantum event actually happens. The universe doesn't pick one path and discard the others. No, it splits and it follows every single path.
So according to the many worlds interpretation, or MWI, every time a quantum event with more than one outcome happens, which is happening constantly all around you and even inside you, the universe branches, and a version of you goes down each path. There's a you who saw the particle spin up, and another you in another universe who saw it spin down, a you who turned left and a you who turned right. It's this constantly growing infinite tree of different yous. Now, before you write this off as pure fantasy, just take a look at this data. This is from a 2011 poll of actual physicists. And yeah, while MWI isn't the most popular interpretation, it's a serious contender. It's supported by almost 1 out of every 5 physicists. So this is not just sci-fi. It's a legitimate scientific hypothesis about the fundamental nature of our reality. So we've got these huge, immense ideas, infinite space, infinite branching realities, but there's this really fascinating thread that runs through all of them, the role of the observer. In quantum mechanics, it seems like the act of observing actually changes reality. And there's this thought-provoking field called quantum psychology that takes this principle and applies it, not to particles, but to our own consciousness. This quote from Dr. Stephen Walensky is so important here. Both quantum physics and this idea of quantum psychology suggest that being an observer isn't a passive thing. Nope, the observer is an active participant who helps shape reality. And we can apply that exact same idea not just to tiny particles, but to our own thoughts and our own emotions.
Here's the big mental shift. Instead of identifying with an emotion, saying I am angry, you can learn to see it as a phenomenon that you are observing. Just think of it like a wave of energy that's passing through you. You are not the wave. You are the ocean that the wave is moving through.
So how do we actually do this? Well, here's a really simple technique from Alinsky's work. The next time a strong feeling comes up, first just notice it, acknowledge it's there. Then, mentally, just drop the label. Don't call it anger or sadness. Instead, try to experience it just as a physical sensation, a form of energy. Watch it without trying to fix it or change it and just see how it shifts and fades all on its own. You become the detached observer of your own inner world. Wow, we have been on quite a journey, haven't we? From the very edge of an infinite cosmos to the branching realities of the quantum world, and then finally right into the universe of our own consciousness. Let's try and pull this all together. So, to recap, that identical clone of you living on another Earth is probably a mathematical long shot. But if the many worlds interpretation is right, then infinite versions of you are branching off with every single moment that passes. The really powerful link between all these ideas is the role of the observer. Physics tells us that observation helps create reality, and psychology gives us a way to use that idea, showing us that how we observe our inner state actually shapes our personal experience. And that brings us to a final, pretty profound question. The old way of thinking was that we live in this fixed, objective world that we just happen to exist in. But modern physics suggests that we're active participants. We don't just see reality, we help create it through the very act of observation. So if that's true, what will you choose to focus on? What reality will you choose to create?